Punk Revolution now. Today we are going to be reviewing the legendary Nick Cave's newest album, Carnage. Nick Cave is an absolutely phenomenal musician. He's been releasing albums for decades, fantastic albums going all the way back to the 80s, some just really interesting, like a unique take on post-punk that's kind of like gothic and kind of bluesy with very, very passionate vocals, kind of theatrical. You gotta check out his discography if you haven't already. He's got classic albums from the 80s and 90s, my favorite being The Good Son and Tender Prey, but he's got fantastic albums moving onwards throughout the 90s and going all the way actually up to modern day. I remember back in 2019, he released this album, Ghosteen, that I listened, and I was just like, holy shit, this is so phenomenal. How the hell is he able to release music this fresh and innovative and beautiful this late into his discography? Like, just an incredibly talented musician. Seriously, one of the most talented musicians I can think of from Australia. You should check him out if you haven't already. And today he's releasing a new album, Carnage, with Warren Ellis. Warren Ellis being a musician that Nick Cave has worked on before in the past. They've also worked on some film scores together. So let's see if they still have it in them to release some fantastic music in 2021. This is now 5 decades, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, 5 decades of fantastic Nick Cave music. Let's start by taking a look at the album cover. So what is going on here musically? Well, first I want to talk a little bit more about Ghosteen, Nick Cave's album from 2 years ago, 2019, because I feel like Ghosteen and Carnage, they have some similarities. They're very different, but there's some striking similarities I want to point out, because I feel like Carnage is in some ways still developing on some ideas explored in Ghosteen. Ghosteen is a very sparse, beautiful, gorgeous album, very like heavenly, with some like beautiful like pianos and synths that are just so gorgeous and kind of like ambient, and some strings that come in and a gorgeous choral background vocals, a very heavenly experience. And it's just such an interesting musical decision that Nick Cave made here to kind of go with this more gorgeous, melancholy, beautiful sound rather than like the, you know, gothic post-punk that I associate with him, because the sparse sound actually complements Nick Cave's vocal delivery so well. Since Nick Cave's vocals are such an essential part of his music, he's just got such an immense presence, very theatrical, like I said, just powerful vocals, powerful lyrics, and having this kind of like gorgeous, sparse, ambient chamber pop sort of thing going on in the instruments really complemented that well. In Carnage, I'm definitely picking up some similar kind of like leaning into like the more atmospheric and more ambient elements. Pretty minimal, pretty sparse instrumentation. A lot of these songs in Carnage kind of just built off of like one foundational little synth line that's kind of repeated throughout the whole song. Very electronic sounding, except compared to Ghosteen, way darker, way more dissonant. While Ghosteen sounded like Nick Cave was ascending up to heaven and reflecting on his life and reflecting on the world in a really beautiful way, Carnage sounds like fucking Nick Cave has some confrontations he needs to deal with. I mean, it's called fucking Carnage. Like, we're gonna hear Nick Cave get a little bit fucking violent in there. Like, this is not a pleasant ascension up to heaven. This is confrontation. It's getting a little bit more dissonant there, too. A little bit more minor chords, a little bit of the strings that sound a little bit more dissonant, and the background choir that sounds a little bit more dissonant. And these darker elements combining with this sort of like pseudo-electronic, pseudo-rock, repetitive instrumentation with the strings and stuff actually reminds me a lot of Radiohead, especially Amnesiac, which is a perfect example of a dark album that really wonderfully blends together rock elements with electronic, as well as The King of Limbs. That's also another fantastic comparison, I think, with the kind of like repetitive electronic kind of beat that kind of forms these songs, except they're pretty sparse and minimal, but also kind of got some weird rock elements in there too. So it seems like the main way that Nick Cave and Warren Ellis put these songs together is to put together this kind of like I said, sparse electronic sound, put it as a foundation, have it repeat pretty much throughout the entire song, and with that foundational kind of like electronic groove, Nick Cave is gonna get up there and fucking just rip with his fucking vocals that of course are gonna be so powerful, very theatrical, and within this sparse kind of like electronic canvas that Nick Cave is going to be kind of be like dominating on top of with his vocals, there's gonna be plenty of other textures thrown in there as well. Like the strings are gonna be coming in there, kind of playing on these minor chords. We're gonna have this background chorus that comes in and sings something about God or whatever. Honestly, sometimes the background chorus sounds sounds a little pitchy to me or a little dissonant. That's probably intentional. Maybe they'll come in with like a piano kind of banging on the piano. Maybe they'll come in with a guitar a little bit playing up and down the riffs. So even though these songs are very, very repetitive and linear and pretty sparse, they kind of fill it up with like just a bunch of different random, sometimes kind of chaotic elements. And although most songs on this album are pretty linear, I have to say there's one song that kind of sticks out above and beyond the rest, which is White Elephant, where we have this, I guess you could say that the foundation of the song is probably the most interesting beat, I guess you could say, within this whole album, because it has this like bass that just scoops so low, and the bass is just like, it's such an interesting sonic experience on your ears, how low it goes, and it has this kind of beat that's kind of like badass, and with this like deep bass and this badass beat, you have fucking Nick Cave coming in there with his most aggressive vocal delivery, talking about, I want to fucking kill you. It's so fucking badass. I love that delivery. It's definitely the most interesting lyrically and the most convincing vocally as well. So I mean, that track rocks. And what I really like about it is about halfway through the song, it changes. It goes from this dark, kind of creepy, heavy beat to this kind of opens up to this almost like gospel, this choir singing, this glorious thing. I mean, it's such a great, like, kind of like, it's almost like a beat change in hip hop from like this dark beat to this beautiful beat. And I think that dynamic works really fucking well in this song. So while White Elephant really fucking did it for me, I think that's great. Unfortunately, I feel like most of this album honestly isn't really working for me. It feels pretty slow, it feels pretty sparse, and I do feel like it kind of feels a little bit thrown together sort of randomly. Like with White Elephant, as that song develops, I'm hearing, you know, more instruments kind of come in with a purpose to kind of help build the tension in that song to the glorious kind of second half. But most of these songs, it does feel a little bit like, okay, we have this song here that's kind of repetitive and sparse, and let's just kind of throw some random things on top of it. It feels a bit random, it feels a little bit unfocused, it feels a bit, maybe a little bit chaotic, but chaotic in a way that I'm not really connecting with so much. It's a formula they follow that is very experimental, it's very unique, but for me, I'm gonna compare it to the King of Limbs again, where yes, it's unique, yes, it's kind of interesting, but like honestly, it just feels very dry to me. I'm not feeling moved by it whatsoever. It just kind of feels a bit like a drag to listen to. I much prefer Ghosteen, the beautiful like melodic elements of Ghosteen that are just kind of chills inducing and beautiful and heavenly. I'm not feeling anything like super interesting melodically going on in this album at all. It feels much more atmospheric than rather relying on any like powerful chord changes or melodies. And to me, it feels in that sense a little bit more like just kind of like an ambient album, except this ambient is kind of, I don't know, just kind of irritating to me. And I honestly, when I'm listening to this album, I just kind of want to be over with already. So with an exception of a few moments in this album, I'm honestly not really enjoying listening to it that much. I think some people are gonna like it more than me. It does have a very unique thing going on here. I can appreciate that. It has the song White Elephant that I think is fantastic. Nick Cave, I mean, he's the fucking man. He's got such interesting lyrics and interesting vocal delivery. Just the vocal delivery combining with these instrumentations that I find very dry and uninteresting and not very well thought out. To me, it doesn't feel like very good chemistry, and I find it boring. So I'm gonna give this a 5.8 out of 10. Maybe try a couple songs off this album. If you like one or two songs off this album, you're probably gonna like the whole album because it is kind of similar throughout the whole thing. If the idea of Nick Cave kind of doing this sort of theatrical vocal performance over Amnesiac, the King of Limbs-esque instrumentation sounds appealing to you, please give it a try. Just really not for me. Nick Cave is still a fucking legend though, even though I wasn't crazy about this album, and I have to admit it's pretty impressive. He's still able to put music out this experimental and this ambitious this late into his career. I mean, he's fucking old now, but he still fucking kicks ass and got a lot more inspiration and passion than most artists nowadays, so that's fucking sick. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Please like, comment, subscribe. My channel is growing very fast because of you. We are going to pass 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 subscribers. We're growing so fast. I'm watching that subscriber tick, and it's all because of all of you, so thanks so much. Punk Revolution now. Like, comment, and subscribe.